Alright, so my name is Chikavari. I'm the Digital Services Librarian at Watertown Free Public Library, and welcome to Cloud Storage 101. Do ask that during the presentation if you can keep your microphone muted, and then we'll have a question and answer portion afterwards. And if you do have questions during the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. So we'll start off with, well, what is the cloud? So the cloud itself is defined by the National Institute of Standards and Technology as cloud computing, which is a model for enabling convenient on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources, for example, network servers, storage, applications, and services that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort or service provider interaction. That's an awful lot of language there. That really just means it's another computer somewhere else that you don't have to manage. So when you're using cloud storage or cloud computing, your computer is connecting to a server, which is just a really large computer, somewhere else. And that server is managed by a different service or a different host. There's usually 3 different categories of cloud services, and that's software, where you're running something virtually. You're able to access that software from your computer, but it's not installed on your actual device. Storage, which is what we'll be talking about today, and computing power or platform providers giving site developers tools to build and host applications. So the concept of cloud computing dates back to the 1960s. The phrase originates from the cloud symbol that was used by flowcharts and diagrams to symbolize the internet, but the term was first publicly used in 2006. So I want to go through a couple definitions really quick, just to make sure that you're familiar with some of the terms. So if you are uploading a file, you are putting it from your computer to another service. It's the opposite of downloading. So downloading is when you are accessing a file that is somewhere else and bringing it to your computer. Streaming, like when you're watching like a YouTube video, you're just getting pieces of a file at a time, and those are not permanently saved to your device. You may have heard of some backup systems like CrashPad, a couple different things that essentially take a snapshot of what you've got and automatically back it up. This may be to the cloud, it may not be. Those are a little bit different from the cloud storage options that we're going to be looking at today. And then there are also enterprise solutions, which are specifically for businesses. These are things like if you've ever heard of Microsoft SharePoint, where it's a collaborative work environment that can also be used as storage. We won't go into those either because we're really focusing on what you can do at home. So what is cloud storage? So cloud storage is a place where you can put files and organize them in an environment that you can access at any time without having to go through any sort of gateway. So you don't have to get your, say, employer to set this up for you. This is something that you can just do on your own. It's just hosted somewhere else, and you don't have to actually manage the housing of the actual files. There are different types of cloud storage. So, sorry, my notes got covered up. Sorry about that. So there are some specific to types of documents. You might be familiar with, say, the Google Photos or iCloud Photos, things like that. And then cloud storage can be used for all sorts of different things. You can use it as specifically a backup. You can use it to collaborate on different things. You can use it to share things with friends and family in a way that's a little bit easier or more dynamic than just trying to email a bunch of things. So there are some things to consider when you are looking at using cloud storage. And these are what we're going to go over: cost, capacity, speed, security, sharing, accessibility, and reliability. So we'll start with cost. So there are many different services, and there are differences between a free service and a paid service other than the fact that you are paying for it. So free services may already come with your device. They may be something that you choose to sign up for. There are some that are completely free that do not have paid options, but they may be more limited in how much they offer you. Some services have free trials, in which case you really need to pay attention to the current terms and conditions, because that way you may sign up with something, put your credit card in, but you only have a very limited time to actually cancel the trial if you don't want to be charged for it. There are some definite advantage to paid services. Usually these are the larger file sizes, better customer support, but there are also some things that are specific to the paid version of a service. And that might be the option to collaborate on a file. It really just depends on what the service offers. So with capacity, the biggest thing you need to look at is how much space do you actually need? If you're just backing up some documents, you're not going to be needing very much space at all. Most documents are going to be less than a megabyte. If you have something that's really involved or has some photos in it, it might be larger. PDF files can be a bit larger. Documents are the smallest, followed by usually music files, and then by pictures if they are high quality, and then video. Video files, depending on the quality of the file, can be anywhere from several hundred megabytes to several gigabytes. And then if you have something like a full-length movie, that's usually going to be, say, about 5 gigabytes. If you have, say, an entire TV series, that would probably be about 20, depending on how many seasons. So one of the things you need to look at is whether or not when you upload the files, they are being compressed. So this is making the file smaller, but it can also reduce the quality of the file. For some services, once you retrieve the file, once you download it from the storage, it may restore it to its original quality and size, but some services may permanently compress the file. And that's just looking at those terms and conditions and see what's going to happen to your file once you've uploaded it. There's also a difference between the options with supplemental storage versus just a plain backup. So if you're doing a backup, you don't need a lot of features. You just want something that would house everything that you want backed up. And you may not need everything that you have backed up. For instance, part of the things that we're doing at the library is with our old newspaper microfilms, we're doing a digital backup of them. So for us, we need, I think, about 4 terabytes right now of data. But as we process those files, we're going to need a lot less space. So if we're looking at that backup, right now we need a lot of backup space. We need it to be able to automatically back up, but we don't need to really be able to search through it. We don't need to be able to collaborate on it. But if you're doing something that's supplemental storage, where you're using that as basically an extension of your hard drive, you might want some of those features to be able to edit a file while you're in that cloud storage, or to be able to share it. So speed is another factor, but it's actually one of the less complicated and important factors. Because speed mostly matters when you're uploading. And it really matters if you're uploading a lot of files at once. If you're only uploading, say, a document every once in a while, you're not going to be really worried about the speed of uploading or really downloading the file, because it'll be there. You can kind of set it and then go on while it does what it needs to do. Speed is another place where the compression of the server will help. It'll make it faster to actually retrieve the file. It may make it a little bit slower to upload because it has to process as the file uploads. But a lot of speed is also dependent on your actual internet connection. So if you have a faster connection, you'll be able to upload and download faster. And you'll really see that as if you have a lot of people on, say, your wireless router, and they're all doing something that uses a lot of bandwidth at once. So say if everyone's on YouTube or Netflix, you'll be able to see your speed go down some when you're trying to download or upload a file. One of the most important parts of cloud storage is looking at the security options. I know I've already said this a couple of times and I will say it again. Make sure you're reading those terms of service. One of the things that they can kind of hide is whether the files are truly private. They may say that the files are private, but if you read the terms, the files may actually be viewable by the service itself in order to advertise to you. So while this doesn't mean that an employee is really going to be like digging around through whatever you've uploaded, it might be that they have a bot that's going through and looking for, say, keywords, or comparing your images to images in an advertising database. So say if you upload a picture of your cat, they know that they can advertise cat food to you because you probably have a cat or you like cats. The location of the server that you're uploading to does matter, because different countries have different laws in regards to search and seizure of data. So if you're looking at the really privacy-minded services, those are mostly going to be hosted overseas, especially in Switzerland, because they have much more strict laws about how your data can be accessed by people other than you. The downside to this is that that can impact the speed of upload and download because you are trying to access something over such a long distance. You also want to make sure that your connection is being encrypted. I know we've talked about encryption in previous classes. This is pretty much making sure that your data is being scrambled so no one can read it directly from what you're looking at. So when you're looking at this, you want to see if it has end-to-end, user-controlled, or client-side encryption. So when you're looking at this encryption, if it's client-side or user-controlled, that means it's on you. It's on your end for that encryption to happen. If it's end-to-end, then everything is, the entire connection is encrypted. But if it's user-controlled or client-side, it is encrypted where it starts. So the company that you are sending it to never sees any of the unencrypted data. Also, you can use strong passwords. If you use a password manager, it's suggested to add that password there. You want to make sure that you're not reusing passwords and that the password is something that would be memorable but not easily guessed. And there's also something called two-factor authentication. This is something that you might have noticed if you're accessing, say, your bank online. And it's just an extra layer of security, which could be something like an email or texted code. There's things called authenticators, which will generate a random code that come as either like little key fobs, or you can have them as apps. Just little things that you can do. It makes the step to get into it a little bit longer, but if it's something that no one else can access, it makes it that much more secure. Finding out where a server is located, some of them probably do advertise it as this is where, if they're privacy minded, they probably do disclose where that server is located. If they don't, chances are you can probably research it, but it depends. So like a company like Google might have servers all over the country. So you don't necessarily know exactly where that server is, but you can be pretty sure that it's in the United States. So sharing is also an option that you can do with cloud storage. And with sharing, you can share individual files or folders. It's really up to what you want to share and how much you want to give access to another person. So say I want to share a document that I created. I wrote a story and I want to send it to someone so that they can proofread it and suggest edits. I can share just that file and send it as a link. They can edit, we can actually talk. This is collaboration. So there's a lot of different options that you can do with sharing. But if you share a folder, you're giving them access to everything that you put in that folder. So if you have a group of photos and you want to share, all right, this is all the photos from this event. If you move something else into that folder, the additional thing that you've added will also be shared. So you really need to make sure that when you're working with it, that you're putting things in places that if you don't want people to see it, make sure that you check the sharing permissions when you do it. And there are different sharing privileges. So you can have it so someone can just view a file. You can have it so they can view and comment on a file. You can have it so they can edit a file. It really depends on what you want the other person to be able to do. For example, I have a folder that I have shared on my Google Drive that's cross-stitch patterns. And I have a friend that we share our cross-stitch patterns. So she has privileges to view the files, to download the files, but also to upload her own files so that we can share what we both have. And there are different ways to share things as well. Within each sharing service, there should be a different button. You can either email to a specific user. If your service is part of a different, so like we have things controlled by the library, we can make it so that everyone within the library domain can see the file without having to specifically give permissions to certain people. It really depends on how you want to send it. If you know that someone already has that service, there might also be a button within it. It really depends on the service and what options they're giving you. With collaborations, there's a lot of different ways that companies handle this. I have the most experience with Google Drive, so I'm going to refer back to that. But you can see when someone else is editing, it shows you who is viewing the document at the time. There's a chat function so that you can talk about the document while you're working on it. There's a lot of different ways to collaborate with this. And that also goes into something called version control. So if you have someone that you are editing a document with, they make a mistake, say they accidentally delete the whole thing. Some services give you the options to restore an older version of a document, but there are limitations to this service depending on which company you're going with. For example, this might be something that has a fee attached to it, that you have to enable this on your account, and it's a monthly subscription fee to make sure that you have access to that. It may be something that you can only restore like 3 versions back or something like that, where it's not collecting the entire version history of the document. But if that's something that you're going to be doing regularly, it's going to be something that you want to look into when you choose your service. So there's also accessibility, and this is about how you're accessing those files. There are different gateways to getting to your files. A lot of different services have something called a desktop client, and this is something that can run in the background and automatically update files. So if you have a service like Microsoft OneDrive, you can set folders for it to automatically back up. and it'll run in the background, and as you make changes or as you add things to that folder, it'll automatically back that file up to the cloud, it'll upload it, and it'll be there for you to access later if you need to. These give you a lot of different options because they also have usually a higher level of security. Because it's something that's connected to your desktop, you're not going through a browser, which can be compromised in different ways. It really gives you the option also for encryption. There's ways to encrypt things without relying on the companies that you're going through if they don't have adequate encryption, or if you really want to be safe as possible. You can encrypt it yourself and then upload it through the desktop client. You can also access things through the browser. I find that this is probably the easiest way. Browser access allows you to just open it right there in the browser. You can edit it. It's usually pretty accessible. And then because it's an environment that you're used to, it's usually really easy to get used to, just to dive right in and start editing, start organizing, start uploading. You can also use mobile apps, especially I know like iCloud and Google Drive have their own mobile app that you can access your files through, which is also a good way if you need to take a document on the go with you. So if, say, you need your insurance card, health insurance card, you can have a copy of it just saved on cloud surface, and then pull it up on your phone if you have the mobile app. But it all depends on what your service has chosen. There's also something called platform integration. So this is things like iCloud and Google Drive, where your device is already attached to one of these services. So if you have an iPhone, just by having an iCloud account, it's attaching to that service, it's automatically trying to back up to the cloud. That account is already created for you. And that way, it's really easy to get into these services, but that's also the ones where chances are they're looking at your files to advertise to you. One of the most important things, especially if you're going to be using a cloud service as any sort of backup or supplemental storage, is reliability. You want to make sure that you have consistent access to the server's not randomly crashing or going down, they're not losing your files. Most servers perform maintenance at some point. Hopefully they will make you aware of when they do maintenance, when your files may not be available, because it may be that you need to access a file for something very important and they're doing a 4-hour maintenance. So this is where having it as supplemental storage might not be as helpful, because if you absolutely need that file right then, you'll want to have a local file copy of it as well. Because it's not something that's in your control, it's something that you want to make sure that if you absolutely need access to something, make sure you have it in multiple places. There are records in different places of server downtime. If you search like, is service down, there's different sites that will tell you if it's down for you or if it's down for everyone. Those sites keep track of how often those services go down. So if it's anything from your internet service provider, whether the service is down just for you or for everyone, you can see a historical log of when those services went down, how often it's gone down. So it really just depends on how often they're maintaining their servers, how well they maintain their servers. And that goes to service history, really, because you want to make sure that it's a service that has a history of being reliable, something that is a reputable company, has good reviews. There are definitely some review sites that kind of catalog, say, the best cloud services of this year or the best cloud services for this type of service. And with those reviews, you can also look at what you need. They may like line it up with bullet points of this is what this service offers for how much. So if you go to cloud service options, what you're really going to be looking at is, say, popular services. That's going to be Google Drive, OneDrive. Amazon has a cloud service. iCloud has their own service. Dropbox. There's also Box, which is a little less common, but still a good service. And then there's specific services. So these focus on, say, photos. So you've got Google Photos, iCloud Photos, Flickr. And then there are also privacy-oriented services, and those are the ones that are going to advertise themselves as being highly encrypted and being hosted somewhere where your data won't be accessed. And then we have a few best practices. So one is not to put everything in one place. So you may be creating a backup. Sometimes you want a backup of the backup, which may sound silly, but if, say, your computer dies, but at the same time, the company that you're hosting your files with goes bankrupt, you want to make sure that you have multiple places where you can access these files if they're important to you. Also, don't just dump everything on a drive. It's really easy to just kind of select all, put everything on the service, and then just ignore it. But you really want to use folders to organize what you're doing. That'll make it much easier to retrieve your items and to share them and do whatever you need to do. And if you have the option, automate backups. You do want to monitor this because you might run out of space. If you've run out of space in your drive that you're trying to back up to, you might need to just clear it out and try to do a fresh backup. You need to see how big the file is that you're trying to back up and see if maybe it's just too large for what you're doing. There may be options to compress your files or to compact them, but you would have to check with that specific service.